We're just waiting for other people to arrive. Hope everybody's having a lovely early afternoon
Or if they're watching from anywhere else, a lovely
or
whatever time of day it is for you.
middle of the night.
If you are watching at the middle of the night, I admire your dedication to assistive technology and learning.
Or it's a disrupted sleep from watching too much football,
Yeah,
perhaps.
I know that's been me watching the football, this World
Hmm.
Cup. Okay, we're at 1:30, so we'll just,
Maybe give it one more minute.
yeah, give it a minute just for everyone to jump in.
I think we'll try to formally kick off at about 12:30, 1:32. Just gives it at least a couple of minutes. If while we're waiting for everybody to arrive, feel free to put in the chat just a quick hello from where you're at, even if you want to acknowledge the country you're on, just so we get a sense of where everybody's dialing in from. So feel free to say hello to each other in the webinar chats window in the bottom right. So what are we thinking? Should we kick this off, Jacinta?
I think so. We can start with our introductions and allow more people to filter in while that's going on. Let's do it.
Fantastic. So welcome to Intopia's Assistive Technology Survey 2025, What We Learned webinar. Before I begin, I'd like to start with something that I found very impactful from Warramie man Damien Griffiths from the First People's Disability Network, who actually says, and I quote him here, there is no word for disability in his people's language, which is wonderful. The focus is on what we need to know about a person so we can ensure they can participate in our community. He says the Western approach to disability labels people and finds the deficit. Again, this is an example of where we have a lot to learn from our traditional custodians of the lands that we're on. So our webinar today between Jacinta and I is being held on the lands of the Wurundjeri Woiwurrung and the Boonwurrung peoples, and I wish to acknowledge them as traditional owners. I would also like to pay my respect to their elders past and present and Aboriginal elders of other communities who may be here today. My name is Rusty, and I'm the Inclusive Research and Strategy Lead at Intopia, and I'm joined by my super talented team member, Jacinta, who is our Inclusive Research Consultant, also at Intopia. And we're being supported by Julia in bringing this webinar to you today. Also, I'd like to thank the captioning that is done by AI Media Captions, which is fantastic. Today's webinar is going to take you through some of the findings and insights that we gained from running our assistive technology survey that ran across the tail end of 2025 and into 2026. I'd also like to take a really quick moment, an important moment, to acknowledge and thank our partners who supported us in distributing the survey, and we couldn't have done it without them. So we have here with Guide Dogs ACT New South Wales, Next Sense, Blind Citizens New Zealand, Blind Citizens Australia, Cerebral Palsy Alliance, uh, CCS Disability Action, including all people. I'm going to get this wrong. Tihunga Hawaii Maori Motunaga Tangata Katoa. We also have Physical Disability Australia, Roundtable on Information Access for People with Print Disabilities Inc., and also Visability. I do acknowledge the captioning is being provided by Meter, so thanks very much, team, for doing that. Finally, this is a recording of this webinar we've published on the Intopia YouTube channel after the event. So you can catch up on anything at a later date. So let's get stuck in. I might throw over to you, Jacinta.
Thanks, Rusty. So just to give you a bit of a recap, Rusty already provided a bit of an introduction as to what the survey was about, but I'll just go into a little bit more detail at this point. So the survey was conducted from December 2025 to March 2026, and it was aimed at anyone who uses assistive technology to access the internet, with a focus on people with disabilities. Our target population for this survey was anyone aged over 18 years in Australia and New Zealand, currently using assistive technology in their daily lives. What we really wanted to find out from this survey were what the current landscape was for assistive technology use in Australia and New Zealand, to better understand how we can inform our accessibility practices and usability, knowledge as well, moving forward. This data we found was a little lacking in this area, and it was something that we thought might really help us all as we move towards a more inclusive online world. I'll just quickly go through the phases that we needed to accomplish to get this survey out there, and also to then help share the results. So phase one included desktop research, which was just a lot of reading other surveys, results of surveys, and just getting an understanding of how other organizations have gone about doing something similar when it comes to understanding how people are using technology in their lives, not necessarily assistive technology. Running workshops with people internally at Intopia to better understand what kind of questions someone who is working within the field, within the accessibility industry, might have when it comes to better understanding how assistive technologies are used. And then also beginning an engagement process with partner organizations like the ones that Rusty has already thanked, to help us ensure that the survey was shared broadly. Phase two included drafting the questionnaire, doing some internal reviews of that questionnaire, going through different stages of that, pilot studies, and then setting up the actual survey platform. Once the survey was then launched, we then maintained it while it was live, and reviewed it while all that was going on. Then in phase four, we closed the survey, analysed the results, built an accessible reporting platform as well, and uploaded the findings to then launch and share with everybody. All right, and I'll just dig in a little bit into crafting the actual questionnaire, because this was quite a lengthy and chunky portion of the project. It started with planning the methodology. So that included, as I already mentioned, kind of going around understanding how other organizations went about their survey, and how they crafted, their questions to find out what they wanted to find out. I also wanted to know what it was that we wanted to find out. So that was where those workshops came in that I mentioned earlier, to kind of understand what are our burning questions, what do we really want to understand. Then documenting everything. So the survey design, understanding how the survey is going to be planned out, how we're going to target different populations, samples, what risks were involved. Then crafting a really comprehensive questionnaire document, ensuring that everything was documented so that if we needed to come back and refer to something, it was all really there and we had traceability back to when decisions were made. And building it, filing it, fixing it, building it, or building in those fixes, and then piling it again. So iterating, allowing the questionnaire to be scrutinized by pilot studies. So that's bringing in participants to undertake the questionnaire in whatever form it was in, to then provide that feedback and ensure that once we launch the actual survey, everything runs smoothly. One thing to note during this process is that it's tempting to try and address as many things as you can, but that just would give you a bloated survey that would have limited value. A focus survey allowed us to give deeper insights and allowed us to interrogate the data to deeper levels. So ensuring that all the topics of interest were things that gelled nicely together so that we could really interrogate what those burning questions that we decided that we had. We also wanted to be able to reuse this questionnaire in future surveys so that we could assess the landscape of assistive tech in the coming years as well. Future iterations of the questionnaire wouldn't require such an extensive process so early on in the process. However, there will need to be some time dedicated to reevaluating it and making any changes and tracking those changes. All right, so then distributing the survey. Now, designing it was a process in itself. Getting it out there so that people actually complete the survey is a challenge in itself. Partner organizations really played a role here, and that's why we're so grateful that they were able to help us and come on board and help us distribute this survey. We have those 9 disability-focused community organizations. We also have our own panel of over about 300 people with disabilities, and also through our social channels too, posting on different social media platforms just to try and spread the net as wide as possible. There are, of course, limitations with a more digital focused approach, preventing us from reaching individuals who might not really be online all that much or have access to those particular areas. So that was something that we needed to take into consideration when analysing the results. And I'll hand it over to Rusty.
Thanks, Jacinta. So I'm just going to take you through a couple of steps that are involved in analysing the results of the survey. The first step we took was cleaning the data and doing a manual review. So it's really important to undertake a full review of the data and to remove any incorrect or duplicate or incomplete responses, just to make sure that everything that we're looking at is correct and fixing any issues with that data itself. Then with a clean data set, we took a first pass at reviewing what the data was telling us. And that sort of helped us to understand and identify any key themes that we wanted to dig deeper into. So for that deeper analysis, because there was quite a few questions in there, there's a lot of data to work through. For deeper analysis, we actually worked with Claude, the AI model, to conduct a robust look at all the data and connections across devices and types of assistive technology people are using, the challenges and the barriers that they face, and other data. But with that comes some caveats. That privacy is obviously a super critical thing. So what we did was we prepared a separate data set and briefing document that had all the logic and all the data in it that was stripped out of any participant details or any other identifiable data to ensure the privacy of everyone was protected. And then kind of using a mixture of prompting and asking questions of the data set and looking at between different types of categories and different types of questions and answers, we kind of started to get a deeper analysis coming through with some of the findings. But we also were super conscious of validating along the way that we were able to look at relationships between different types of answers around assistive technology, around adaptive strategies, age groups, disability types, challenges, barriers, and stuff like that. As we all know, though, AI has a tendency to make stuff up. So we also did a series of spot checks, reviews, and issue resolutions. And that was just to ensure that we're testing what was being spat out at us and ensuring any errors were identified and resolved. And, funnily enough, it's not really funny working in the world of AI for some of us. It's not funny at all, but for others, it's an opportunity. But I definitely found that when you question some of the things that would come back from the prompting, it would say, "Oh, I'm sorry, you're right. Oh, I missed this." So there was lots of that stuff going on. But essentially, we had this really robust way of spot checking the data to make sure anything we were getting back was valid. With the data fully analysed, the next step was creating an accessible online report. So I might just jump to the next slide. And that was really for ease of comprehension and navigation of the survey findings. And a key thing with having sort of a lot of data and percentages and things that are broken down, visualizations are a really great way to communicate findings from surveys to help with comprehension. However, often data visualizations can become quite hard to interpret and they're not always accessible. So our team really focused on labels and chart types that don't rely on color alone, that to use chart types that don't become confusing, where it's just got lots of data shoved in it, so it becomes tough to understand and read. And additionally, we made sure that every visual had a data table alternative so that you can see what the data means rather than relying on the visuals only. To help with navigating the findings, we created a clear structure separated out into sections. So that was sections like obviously having an overview and information about who took part and some of those demographic details. Then looking at devices people use, communicating assistive technology usage, some key insights into assistive technology itself, experiences people have with their assistive technology and adaptive strategies, and then finishing off with AI tools and accessibility and how people are starting to use AI. There was also a super clear focus on making sure the report was created in plain language to support comprehension and readability. Often, when you read findings from surveys, the words are quite big and the sentences are quite complicated, and it sort of loses its focus and communication. Next slide, I think.
Yeah. So now it's time
The
to
results.
talk about those results that you
Yeah.
spent time analyzing. We've now learned how the survey was built, how we went about going and creating the questionnaire, and then we've talked about how we then presented the results. So let's go through what we actually found out.
Nice one. To kick us off, just some overview. The survey went out to Australia and New Zealand with 75% of respondents from Australia and 25% from New Zealand. And 9 out of 10 respondents are living with a disability, impairment, or chronic condition. Blindness was the most reported, with 38% people reporting blindness, followed by neurodivergence at 30% and physical disability at 28%. And interestingly enough, like nearly half of people who identified as having a disability, 49% to be specific, live with two or more conditions. And some people living up with up to 4 or 5 separate conditions, which really complicates their accessibility needs, and we need to be aware of that. The next slide. So the key findings we had from this or our key insights that we pulled out from just to give you a high level grab at the results, was don't design for a single disability profile. And that's that going back to that point I just made, over nearly half the people with disability in our survey reported having 2 or more conditions. So if you're designing for and accounting for one single disability profile and one type of access needs, you're missing out on a huge amount of your audiences. Screen reader support is non-negotiable. A survey found that more than half of desktop and mobile users rely on screen readers. Accessibility must work across devices. So 8 in 10 respondents use a desktop and a mobile phone or tablet online to do their work and social work online. Number 4 is don't deprioritize desktop. So nearly 8 in 10 respondents use a desktop for things like form management and things that take a lot more time to fill in. That's still a lot of people still use desktop as well as their mobile. Number 5 is probably the biggest one for us that came through from the survey results, was that the tools aren't broken. So assistive technology, adaptive strategies are strong, they work well, they're robust, they work well for our cohorts, yet your website is broken. So the top reported barriers that were found were website issues, not limitations of assistive technology. And then the final one is that AI, and this is probably no surprise to many of you, AI is a part of how people with disability get things done now, with over half of those surveyed using AI tools or features to help with online tasks.
All right, so we'll dive a little bit deeper into some of those points there and a few other key insights as well that we've drawn out from the results. So just going through what devices people use. So most use a desktop or laptop to do tasks online. That's 92% of our respondents. Windows is by far the most common operating system. We can see that 87% of desktop users are more likely to use Windows than any other operating system. Most respondents also use a mobile phone or tablet online, so 88% of our respondents. And Apple iPhones are the most common device used by those particular respondents, by over half of all mobile users that we surveyed. A slightly higher rate of desktop use might be attributed to smartphones being a newer technology, or some older folks being less likely to see their phone as anything other than something to make calls or send text, kind of like my own dad. Other reasons may be certain types of disabilities that make phone use a little bit more challenging, and so those people are just more comfortable using desktop for tasks online. 8 in 10 respondents also use both devices too. So a very high number of our respondents use both desktop and mobile. So our people who use assistive technology aren't just relying on one kind of device there. They're going across devices to complete their tasks. So thinking of the tasks that people complete, the grid that is being presented on screen, it's a graph taken from the results itself, so you can go on to the results and see this information for yourself. But where a color is darker or a number is higher, that means that there's a high percentage of people that use that particular device for that particular task. So for online shopping, for example, 50% will complete their online shopping task on desktop and 28% will complete it on mobile. Um, One of the key findings that we extracted from this particular kind of question was where people were more likely to do more complex tasks, things like long forms, or online shopping, where there's quite, maybe a longer engagement and a few more different types of interaction that the user is required to complete. And the reason why I was so curious about this question is a participant once coined a phrase in a usability testing session called big internet and little internet. So complex tasks being more likely to be done on desktop, that's big internet, and shorter, quicker, simpler tasks are more likely to be done on mobile, little internet. And what I really wanted to find out from this question was, so where does big internet sit and where does little internet sit? And pretty much the bigger tasks, more complex tasks are on desktop, and the simpler tasks are on mobile. So yeah, it was really cool to kind of see that come together.
So just looking at assistive technology usage, most of our respondents use more than one type of assistive technology. So on desktop, 45% use two or more types of assistive technology and 13% use three or more. And so from the data that we collected, 20% of respondents use a screen reader and braille display, 11% reading or using text-to-speech tools and screen magnifiers, 10% screen reader and screen magnifiers, their combo, and then 9% using reading or text-to-speech tools and speech recognition altogether. So it's interesting here to see that most people don't use just one type of assistive technology to get their things done on the internet, that they use multiple types, and they can just give you an understanding of some of that spread. And assistive tech on mobile, screen users account for the majority of assistive technology on iPhone. On Android, users use more evenly distributed across tool types, which is an interesting one in that that could be attributed to iPhone having some built-in technology into them and a single operating system, whereas Android has multiple access in tech types that you can use with it. So that's a very interesting thing that we picked up.
All right, and moving on to another one of these wonderful visualizations, similar to the one that I discussed before. So this visualization is about how disability affects technology use. So looking here, we can see that respondents with blindness rely heavily on screen readers at 81% and braille displays at 32%. Low vision users are more likely to use a screen magnifier or a screen reader as well, accounting for low vision being such a large category as well in what needs need to be met with an assistive technology. People with a physical disability have the highest rate of speech recognition use. So that's using tools like Dragon or voice control on a Mac. And people with a neurological condition or who have low vision lean most heavily on reading or text to speech tools as well. So that's using things like read aloud or other narration or like if you're reading an article and you're able to have that announced to you. That's something that yeah is common among those groups as well. Uh, Moving on. So the top assistive tech used on desktop of screen readers, we have JAWS and NVDA, which would come as no surprise to most people. For screen magnifiers, we have Windows Magnifier and Zoom Text, which also drew in popularity with built-in tools. So those are tools that exist in your browser. So just like zooming in on your browser or using text scaling and enlargement on your system settings. Um, for reading or text-to-speech tools, we have built-in browser tools as well. So many browsers now have like things like reading modes where you can have things read aloud to you or operating system features as well. And then also read aloud itself. So when we look at these kind of built-in and out-of-the-box tools being popular, it's something that's easy, it's there, it's already on the computer. So there's less of a learning curve when it comes to using them. Also, one thing to note too with JAWS users, I missed this, was that 68% are using the current version of JAWS. So that's JAWS 2026, and most respondents were also using like one of the more recent versions within the past couple of years as well. So you can see that JAWS users are usually keeping up to date with the latest technology. For top assistive tech on mobile, for screen readers, we have VoiceOver and then followed by TalkBack on Android. For screen magnifiers, we have built-in devices or browser zoom. So that's again using the zoom controls already native to the browser that you're using on your mobile phone or the text scaling or display scaling that is available on your mobile device. Reading or text-to-speech tools, again, built-in or OS features and many numerous other tools that can be downloaded from maybe the App Store or through a file that you can download online if you're on Android. Right.
Thanks, Jacinta. So when we're talking about satisfaction with desktop assistive technology, what we found overwhelmingly was that most assistive tech users reported being satisfied with their tools. So screen readers and braille display users scored the highest across all platforms. And then we also looked at barriers to online access. So almost all of the top barriers are website and content design issues. They're not caused by assistive tech tools themselves. So people are not actually asking for better tools, they're asking for more accessible websites. And when we look at some of the statistics for this, 34% found that they came across inaccessible or poorly coded web pages. 26% found challenging pop-ups, overlays, modals, cognitive load, complexity, and time cost as barriers to online access. 23% reported form accessibility, that a lot of forms aren't accessible and are difficult to navigate. 22% of respondents said that they were missing or poor labels, and 19% found that the insignificant, like not sufficient images, graphics, visual content, only content without text alternatives. So as we can see, it's not really about the tools, assistive technology tools, or our adaptive strategies. They're actually about making websites more accessible, which we all know is the challenge.
And just like really interesting to mention as well, these barriers to online access. So this was something that people could, when they were responding and talking about their particular assistive technology, so say someone's a screen reader user, they were able to enter in 3 barriers into a free text field. Then once we received all of our responses, we went through a coding process of understanding what those barriers were that those people raised and coding them into these categories. That way we could get a really thorough understanding of the kinds of issues that people were encountering, but in the language that they use. So we didn't have to worry about them understanding, more technological language. And then we interpreted that to kind of come up with these categories. So yeah, that was just for any other data nerds out there. I just wanted to share that.
Last one.
All right. AI, yay. What's AI? I haven't heard of this thing
I've
before.
heard of this. This is the first time I've ever heard of it.
Yeah, right. Oh, yeah, it's my first time I've ever heard of it too. What is this newfangled technology everyone's? It's just all the rage. So, more than half of our responders, 59%, use AI tools to help make online tasks more accessible. So, in something that I found really interesting, and this was something that I encountered in that research that I did at the very beginning of this whole process, was a digital inclusion index report that spoke to AI, found that the national average for AI usage was 45%. Usage started highest among 18 to 34-year-olds at 69%, but then the usage slowly reduced with every following age group, with only 15.5% for 65 to 74-year-olds and 10.6% for 75 and over. So to recap, they started with 69% for 18 to 34-year-olds and ended up at 10.6% for people over 75. Now, the age brackets don't align neatly with the ones that we have, and our data pool is much smaller than the one that they were able to pull from. But it just wanted to, yeah, kind of add that as something to show what that difference might be in the age groups that we have here, 55 to 64, being higher adopters of AI compared to kind of that general population. So yeah, just a little interesting tidbit that I came across. What this does tell us is that AI curious AT users might be looking to AI tools a little bit more to fill in gaps in access and unmet needs. Maybe there's more of a reason why people are seeking out those tools to help them overcome a challenge or a workaround that they're facing. Uh, what AI tools people are using. So only a small number of AI users use the features being integrated into their existing assistive technology. So only 14%. There's a few tools out there where AI is being added as a feature that you can start using. But for most of our respondents, that wasn't what they were kind of going towards when it came to AI tools. And it might be due to, maybe it's an extra cost or the implementation doesn't quite work and they like the tool as is and they don't really want any changes to it. 73% use tools like large language models. These tools are also popular among non-AT users as well. And it's still early days in AI and what its role is going to be within assistive technology, how it's going to shift that landscape. But just one thing I kind of wanted to sort of go back to when it comes to how AI can influence assistive technology is a participant once said to me that users find solutions to their own needs faster than product teams can. So they're encountering an issue every day and finding workarounds that work for them. Um, so with the knowledge that exists, that knowledge of how to work around a problem that exists with them. It's not within an LLM or oftentimes not even at the end of a Google search. It's something that you need to understand from that individual themselves. So new technologies and emerging ways of communicating are changing how products are being built and interacted with. Uh, we don't know yet what role assistive tech plays in that landscape, but once exposed to those new digital environments, users will know what their experiences are like. And so it's important that we continue to talk to them just to see what they're finding out and what new barriers might be emerging that we aren't aware of. All right, I'll get off my soapbox now. and we'll have time for questions. Okay. Our first question that's come through. Um, have we received any feedback on how people pay for assistive technology and their perspectives on costs and subscriptions? That was out of scope for the survey. It was something I was interested in myself, but I wanted to keep the scope of the survey a lot narrower. Although, yeah, that is something that I'm interested in just chatting with participants over the many different user studies that I've been privileged to be involved with. Cost can be definitely prohibitive. There's also the learning curve to learn how to use a new technology, particularly if you've interacted with technology in one way, and then all of a sudden you find yourself with needing an assistive technology later in life. So there can be a really steep learning curve, might be a resistance to having to move to adopting a new, like perhaps it's moving from screen magnification to screen reader, just because that just it takes a little while to learn. All right. Next question here. What barriers were most frequently reported by assistive technology users despite organizations meeting WCAG requirements? And what practical actions would you prioritize to address them? And which WCAG issues had the greatest real world impact on participants? So I suppose we covered that with those barriers to access. We didn't align them necessarily with WCAG success criteria. But from what we could see, those issues were things that can be really easily fixed and caught early as well, with robust accessibility practices within your team, either working across the team as well, from your design team. Also ensuring that your research team is up to date on how to run research with people with disabilities, all through to your dev team as well, understanding just those low-hanging fruits that are really easy to catch, and then understanding what solutions you can apply to those fixes. Rusty, did you have any thoughts on that one at all?
No, I agree with you on that.
Awesome. On to the next question. Having been testing accessibility for an application coming up, and they would like to know more about new tools available in the market. Um, the tools, I'm going to interpret that as assistive tech tools. Just maybe you're wanting to know what assistive technology you should be testing when you're running your accessibility testing, activities on something that you're developing. Some the tools that we mentioned are those ones that are really popular. You can go on to the results and find them and find those top tools. Not much has changed for a lot of the main ones, like you've got JAWS NVDA for desktop screen readers, you've got VoiceOver, TalkBack for mobile screen readers. And from there, it can vary a little bit in terms of what people use for screen magnification. You got your software versions like Zoom Text, or you have your inbuilt versions in the browser, or your OS as well. So there's quite a bit of variance, but I would recommend just going onto the results and just double checking what the most popular ones are and what you feel confident using as well for the testing too. Okay. Someone's after
I have
there's a yeah, yeah,
I've
go
got one
Rusty.
question here, which is where the AI tools are easy to use by the users. We didn't actually get much data that actually like open field data to actually talk about that one. But what we did find is why some people don't use AI tools, which might give you a little bit of insight into that. And the most common reason is that it's a preference for non-AI solutions. So more than half of non-users actively chose not to use AI as a preference rather than it being a barrier. So rather than it being something that they struggle with, they just don't want to use it. And they cited privacy and security concerns were raised by 41% of people who don't use AI. And for people who use assistive tech for essential services like banking and healthcare, these are kind of real concerns. And that any promotion of AI as an accessibility solution must consider data trust. Nearly 30% of non-users said they simply don't know of any AI tools that support accessibility, highlighting a really potential awareness gap for where accessibility can play a role in access, hardware I can play a role in access. Sorry. I hope that answers that question a little bit.
Awesome. There was another question as well around missing or poor labels, and just a little bit of clarification around that, and what that means. So missing labels, so it would be missing labels for like a form field, or other interactive components as well, where a label is needed, or poor labels, in that the label wasn't very descriptive or whatever that interactive component was, or yeah, just was poorly formatted. That was the extra context there. Uh,
I have another open question in that is there a PDF or printable version of the survey results we can download? We actually didn't produce a fully printable one, mainly for accessibility reasons, because there was quite a lot of information in there. We did produce an online one that we checked to make sure that it's accessible. This might be something that if you want to reach out to us through our emails that are at the end here, like you can reach out to us and we can look at how we can grab some of that data for you, maybe package it up into something that might be easier to take away. But mainly we focused on creating an online report that was easy to navigate and that was accessible and comprehensible as well.
Another question here regarding reading on text-to-speech tools. So the question is about, when are text-to-speech tools used over screen readers? So do screen reader users typically use text-to-speech tools in combination, or are these typically different users? I would say, based on what we understand from the survey, and also my understanding of the participant panel that we have as well, is that they would be generally different users. Our screen reader users typically are using just a screen reader, sometimes paired with a braille display. Reading a text-to-speech users, that might be an add-on, say, onto a screen magnifier. So, for example, and this is where the naming of things gets a little confusing. What is a screen reader? What is text-to-speech? There you go. Obviously, when you go into how the things work, it's a bit easier to understand, but what is it to the user is different to what it is to people who kind of understand how the backend works and everything. So someone who uses a screen magnifier, that magnifier software might have a text-to-speech, or perhaps it's called a screen reader tool on it as well, which can be used for understanding text. If like they highlight it and they can have that information announced. So sometimes see that kind of pairing out in the wild. But otherwise, for the most part, I find people who use text-to-speech tools are often doing it to aid reading, because they might have some barrier to understanding or comprehending information in a written form.
Mm,
Next,
mm.
yeah,
I just
sorry,
cover off
Rusty, you
one
go.
just about if anyone's looking for NZ only figures, is there a raw anonymized data set available on request? We can certainly, if you get in touch with us, we can certainly look at providing anonymized data sets. We have a full data set that's the raw data. It's a lot, but we certainly can do that if you want to reach out and contact us directly. We can talk about that.
And another question, are you planning on running the survey again in a year or so? So that is the plan. So we ran this at the end of last year, finishing the survey period at the start of this year. So we'll then take, there won't be any survey run in the coming year, and we'll come back to it again possibly next year, and figure out when that will go ahead.
I think that's everything except for a lovely piece of feedback, just saying that they've read the online report and found it really accessible. Great job. Thank goodness, because it'd be pretty bad if Intopia did an inaccessible report. It would reflect pretty poorly on us. But thank you for that lovely feedback. Appreciate it.
Okay, I think that's time for questions done. Um, I'll hand it over to you, Rusty, to wrap up.
Thanks very much. So look, again, we really appreciate everybody coming along and sharing their time with us this afternoon. It's been a fascinating process, actually, getting a deeper understanding of people's use of assistive technology and also adaptive strategy. For me, as somebody who's newer to the company, it's been a real eye-opener into understanding technology and how it's used. And I think the resounding thing is that, again, the tools that we all use to navigate the internet and navigate barriers and challenges. It's not due to the tools themselves, it's due to the way that the internet's built. So we need to keep on fighting that good fight around building accessible products and services that everyone can access. And that's a thank you for us. Thank you so much, Jacinta, the Brains Trust, and also for Julia for helping us run the session, and also to AI Media captioning, and also to all our partners. We couldn't have done it without you. So thank you so much. And if you'd like to get in contact with us, please, our emails are on the screen now, rusty.benson@intopia.digital or jacinta.gregory@intopia.digital. And feel free to reach out with us. So thanks very much for coming.
Thanks, all. A recording of the webinar also will be available on Intopia's YouTube channel shortly. So thanks, everyone.
Thank you all. Have a lovely afternoon.